Why do parents still hate SpongeBob? You walk into the room. Your kid is glued to the screen. SpongeBob's screaming about jellyfishing. Patrick's chewing on a rock. Squidward looks like he's about to quit life. Again, your kid laughing hysterically. You wondering if their brain is turning to soup. It's not just the noise or the weird voices. It's something deeper, something that hits a nerve. The show feels unhinged, like it's bypassing logic and drilling straight into your kid's brainstem. You grew up with Sesame Street, maybe Blue's Clues, shows that spoke slowly, taught letters, paused for answers. SpongeBob doesn't pause. He shouts, he flips, he combusts, and deep down, a part of you wonders, is this doing something to them? That uneasy feeling? That's the beginning of the backlash, the part where discomfort turns into suspicion, and suspicion turns into straight-up hate. But it's not just about the sponge. It's about what he represents, a loss of control, a break from the kind of childhood you expected to provide. Here's what nobody really says out loud. SpongeBob makes parents feel powerless. It's not because the show is bad, it's because it doesn't follow the rules. Any rules. There's no clear lesson, no tidy moral. It moves fast, makes no sense, and kids love it more because of that. For a parent trying to raise a child in an overstimulated world, that's terrifying. You want boundaries, structure, values. SpongeBob delivers. A sponge wearing square pants making fart jokes under the sea. The fear isn't just that the show is loud. The fear is that your child is absorbing something you don't understand. And if you can't understand it, how can you trust it? That's when the internal alarm starts ringing. You start questioning yourself. Is this what parenting looks like now? Should I be stopping this? Am I doing something wrong? That's not about SpongeBob. That's about you. Your uncertainty, your worry, your instinct to protect something you can't quite define. And once that fear sets in, the next step is looking for proof that you're right to be worried. Which brings us to the study that parents still point to whenever they want to ban Bikini Bottom. In 2011, researchers at the University of Virginia dropped a study that changed everything. They took a bunch of 4-year-olds, showed some of them 9 minutes of SpongeBob, and then gave all the kids tests measuring memory, focus, and problem solving. The kids who watched SpongeBob, they tanked the tests. Cue the headlines. SpongeBob damages kids' brains. Fast-paced cartoons hurt focus. Parents everywhere thought, I knew it. The weird sponge was now officially a cognitive threat. But here's the part those headlines skipped. The study was tiny, only 60 kids. The test happened right after watching, and it didn't track any long-term effects. In other words, it showed a short-term dip in attention, not permanent damage. But the fear? That stuck, because it confirmed what parents were already feeling, that SpongeBob's chaos wasn't just annoying, it was harmful. It gave scientific-sounding backing to something that was always emotional. Here's the catch. Confirmation bias is powerful. When you're already worried about something, you'll grab onto anything that proves your fear was right. And SpongeBob, after that study, became the poster child for everything parents thought might be wrong with modern cartoons. Let's talk about the elephant, or sponge, in the room. Cartoons today don't look anything like the ones parents grew up with. If you were raised on Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, or Arthur, those shows were soft-spoken, predictable, and structured. They looked you in the eye, asked you questions, and waited patiently for answers. There were morals. There were clear boundaries. Now jump to SpongeBob. He's loud. He moves fast. The scenes cut every few seconds. 1 second he's flipping Krabby Patties. The next he's inflating his arms or screaming into a megaphone underwater. There's no lesson. There's just SpongeBob being SpongeBob. To adults, that's jarring. It feels like nonsense. Or worse, like mental junk food. And that gut-level rejection? It's generational. Psychologists call it nostalgia bias. We romanticize the media we grew up with and instinctively distrust whatever doesn't look like it. If it's unfamiliar, it must be worse. But here's the twist. Those old cartoons, they weren't perfect either. Looney Tunes had explosions and anvils falling on heads. Tom and Jerry was straight-up cartoon violence. And Ren and Stimpy? That show was way weirder than SpongeBob ever dreamed of being. The difference is speed. Modern cartoons move faster. They're built for a generation of kids born with screens in their hands. To parents, that feels like chaos. To kids, it feels normal. And that disconnect creates friction. Here's what hits the hardest. A lot of parents don't hate SpongeBob because of what he is. They hate him because of what he reveals. You're tired. You're juggling work, bills, dishes, life. Your kid's bouncing off the walls, and you need 10 minutes to breathe, so you hand them the remote. You open the YouTube app, you let SpongeBob take over, and it works. They calm down, they're laughing, you get a break, but then the quiet hits, and the guilt creeps in. Should I have read to them instead? Is this rotting their brain? Am I phoning it in as a parent? That guilt has to land somewhere. And the easiest place to put it? The TV. More specifically, that sponge who just kept them entertained while you reheated leftovers and tried to answer emails. This is classic cognitive dissonance. You value mindful parenting, but sometimes you need SpongeBob to keep your kid busy. Those two things don't match, so your brain gets uncomfortable. Instead of blaming the situation, it blames the symbol. SpongeBob becomes the scapegoat, the reason your kid's acting hyper, the reason they're not listening, the reason you feel disconnected. But the truth is, he's just a cartoon. The real struggle isn't with SpongeBob. It's with the pressure to be perfect in a world that makes that nearly impossible. Here's where things get interesting. Despite all the panic, there's no strong scientific proof that SpongeBob causes lasting harm. In fact, some recent studies suggest the opposite, that chaotic, surreal cartoons might actually boost creativity. Psychologists call it divergent thinking. It's the ability to think outside the box, solve problems in weird ways, and generate new ideas. Watching something unpredictable, like SpongeBob, forces the brain to adapt, follow randomness, and make connections on the fly. That's not brain rot, that's mental flexibility. And here's another thing. Kids are smarter than we think. They know SpongeBob isn't real. They don't expect logic. They're not copying him to become him. They're laughing at the absurdity because they get the absurdity. The real issue isn't SpongeBob, it's how we use him. If kids are watching TV for 5 hours straight without breaks or interaction, yeah, that's a problem. But a couple episodes in between school, play, and dinner, that's not harmful, that's normal. It's not the sponge, it's the balance. Blaming the show is easy. But understanding how and why our kids connect with it, that's where the real parenting power is. And if we're honest, SpongeBob isn't the first cartoon to freak parents out. He won't be the last. Here's the pattern. Every generation of parents finds something their kids love and then panics about it. In the 80s, it was MTV. In the 90s, it was violent video games. Today, SpongeBob, TikTok, YouTube Kids. Same fear, new target, because it's not really about the content. It's about losing touch with the culture your kid is growing up in. It's about watching them laugh at something you don't understand and wondering if that gap is getting too wide. SpongeBob just happens to be the face of that gap. To adults, he's absurd, annoying, and overstimulating. To kids, he's hilarious, harmless, and full of energy. That clash isn't going anywhere. Because when your kid loves something you don't, it forces a question. Am I out of touch, or are they being influenced by something dangerous? That uncertainty? It's uncomfortable. So we go with the simpler answer. This show is bad. Turn it off. But the backlash doesn't kill the show. It just keeps the cycle going. One generation's bad influence becomes the next generation's nostalgia. The hate fades. The fear fades. The sponge stays. So what do you do when your kid's obsessed with a show you don't understand? Simple. You lean in, not out. Instead of banning SpongeBob, watch it with them. Not for hours. Not to study it like a threat. Just sit down. See what they see. Ask what they find funny. Ask what parts they like. Let them explain the nonsense to you, even if it makes zero sense. Why? Because that moment of shared weirdness builds trust. You're not just monitoring their screen, you're joining their world. That matters way more than cutting screen time by 15 minutes. The real danger isn't SpongeBob, it's disconnection. When you shut down what your kid enjoys, you shut down their willingness to share it with you. That's how the gap grows. That's how communication breaks. But when you get curious, even about a sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea, you show them something powerful, that you don't need to get it to care. And sometimes, that's all kids really want. If you've ever had to mute SpongeBob so your parents wouldn't lose it, or if you are the parent side-eyeing the pineapple under the sea, hit like. Subscribe if you're into breaking down the weird psychology behind what we watch, especially the stuff everyone else dismisses as just cartoons. And drop a comment. Was SpongeBob banned in your house growing up? Or were you the kid secretly watching him on full blast when no one was looking? We read every single one.